In the last section, we put together our first Docker Compose file. It has two separate services, or essentially types of containers, available in it. The first is called Redis Server, and it uses the image Redis. The second is called Node App, and it uses the Docker file that we put into our current directory. So we're now going to figure out how we can take this Docker Compose file and create the two separate containers. But before we do, one quick thing I want to mention here. Remember the entire reason that we started talking about Docker Compose in the first place. We had said, oh yeah, we want to use Docker Compose because it makes networking or connecting these containers together very straightforward. But you'll notice that we have put absolutely no configuration into this file right here to kind of specify any layer of networking. So believe it or not, by just defining these two services inside this file, Docker Compose is going to automatically create both these containers on essentially the same network. And they're going to have free access to communicate to each other in any way that they please. So by just using Docker Compose to create container 1 and Docker container number 2, the two have free access to each other and can exchange as much information as they want without having to exchange or open up any ports between the two. So when the two containers are created using Docker Compose, we don't have to go through any port declaration like this. This port declaration right here is solely to open up our access to our container on our local machine. We don't have to do any additional steps like this to connect together the two separate containers. Now, that might be great for me to say, but in reality, hey, how do we actually kind of access the Redis server from our Node.js code? Well, let's open up our index.js file, and I'll show you how it's done very easily. Now, back inside of our index.js file, remember we've got that redis.createClient call right here. And I had said that we were going to eventually come back to this and add in a little bit of information about the location of the Redis server that we are running. So to specify where this Redis server is running, I'm going to put in a set of curly braces, like so. And then we're going to specify a host option. Now, usually, if we were not using Docker, this was just a traditional Node application without any Docker stuff whatsoever, we would usually put in some type of address right here, like https myredisserver.com or something like that. So usually we would put in some type of connection URL right here. But since we are making use of Docker Compose, back over here, so here's our Docker Compose file, we can connect to this other container running the Redis server simply by referring to it by its name of Redis-server. So rather than putting in some long form connection URL like this right here, we're going to delete that and we will replace it with Redis-server. Now, one thing to be aware of here is that Node.js, Express.js, which is the kind of the framework we're using to actually render and respond to requests, and Redis itself have no idea what Redis-server means. Redis is going to just take that string and it's going to kind of use it on good faith and say, you know what, I'm just going to assume that this is a meaningful URL. I'm going to assume that this is something like https://my_redis-server or something like that. And so Redis is just going to make a good faith, or this Redis client right here is going to make a good faith effort to connect to the server at this host name. When the connection request goes out from this Node application, Docker is going to see it. It's going to see that it's trying to access a host called Redis-server, and it's going to say, oh, I know what you're looking for. You are looking for this other container over here, the container with the name Redis-server. And so when our Redis client right here tries to connect to the Redis server, it's going to get automatically redirected over to this other container running our copy of Redis. Now, just to be really complete here, technically when we create the client, we can also specify a port that the Redis server is running on. By default, the port that's always used with Redis is 6379. So I'm just going to add that in there for completion's sake. But again, it is a default port number. So now when our Express application starts up, or the Node application starts up, it's going to try to create a connection to a Redis server. It's going to reach out looking for a host name of Redis-server. Docker is going to see that it's looking for Redis-server, and it's going to redirect that connection over to this other running container. So that's what's going to automatically connect together these two containers and get them to communicate together in some fashion. Okay, so that's it. Let's take another quick pause right here. We're going to come back to the next section and we're going to figure out how we're going to actually start all of our different containers with this Docker Compose file.